Okay, so today we are doing week 8, day 3. It looks like this week we've started more of the web, doing HTTP and kind of working with some of that. Today we're going to be introducing APIs, which we're going to do through looking at a use case for an end user and having a what's called a user story. So I'm going to describe something I want to happen on our website we're building, and we're going to look at how we can solve that. So I'm going to be working pretty much directly from the README today. So if you want to follow along with that, um, you can go ahead and pull that up. So let's get started with our use cases for the day. I'm going to put this, I'm going to drag this into view here first and we'll kind of look through this. So what we want to do for this web application that we're going to write is we want to go to a website and we want to see a button. We've done this before. We already know how to do that with our HTML. We can go ahead and add a button. When I click a button, I want to see a list of users that we're going to get from this place here. And so when I look at this, I know we're going to add an event listener like we're used to with our buttons. And when we click that, it should give us a user from this list. Now, this is going to simulate hitting an API endpoint. A lot of APIs that you will reference to get data from will return it in JSON format, which we will go ahead and parse through. We're going to learn how to do that today, but it's just going to return a big, long, looks like a list of JSON here. It's going to give us, looks like a whole bunch of different people, email address, regular address, username, that sort of thing. So we want to use the information from that. And when we click that button, we want to just see the list of users. Okay, when looking at that users, I want to be able to click the same button to remove all the users from our web page. So we kind of know how to do that too, thinking some more event listener stuff. And I want to be able to show and remove users over and over and over again. Okay, so let me do that. Let's go ahead and get started here. Initially, we know we're going to have our HTML page to pull up our website. So let's go ahead and get our index. Y'all know I like just using the boilerplate, which kind of has everything plugged in right away for me. I'm going to remove out some of these. I don't need that for now. Okay, oops. Take out that extra body I just added. All right, so it looks like we're going to, with this one, instead of creating our own styles.css, we're going to do something a little different, kind of make it easier on us. We're going to just import somebody else's CSS, basically, that they've written to reference certain tags and elements within the HTML. So this is called Bootstrap that we're going to be using. And you can see in the README, there's a link you could go ahead and click on and take a look at it. But this Bootstrap CSS file, we're just going to import it in. We can do that right here in our referencing which style sheet we're going to use. We're just going to plug in the, oh, let me grab this from behind this. I guess the website this is coming from. We could probably look at the documentation here a little bit more, but this is in the README. So this is where we are getting the library, basically, our CSS file. So we're telling, instead of us writing our own in here, it's not going to look at that. It's going to look at this, which let's see if we can open this, which looks a mess if you try to open it because it's not formatted nicely. But you can see it's just a whole bunch of styling stuff. Awesome. So glad we don't have to do the CSS for this. Okay. Next up, we are going to write our own JavaScript for this. It looks like in the example, they are putting it within the head. So we're going to follow along with how they do that. And they've named theirs app.js. I am just going to refer to scripts.js because that's what I said it was. And take that out. All right, so this is going to be the source for our JavaScript for this. Okay. We have here, we're going to have a header again. Now we don't have to create this all using JavaScript. Thank goodness you can just create it in HTML. That was just practice last week, learning how to do that. So we're just going to go ahead and put in our header here. We're going to have our main page and our button. And it says click me. Then it looks like we're going to add a div because we need a container to hold the information we're going to be getting back from the API. So we're going to give this a class and an ID so that we can maybe reference this a little easier later. Okay, so we have list group and we're going to do the ID is going to be main. All right, there's our div. Okay, so after this, we have our JavaScript. It's empty. It's waiting for us. Let's go ahead. We're going to open this up with our live server. Just take a look and make sure that everything looks like it should. Oh, it's so bright. I'm sorry, but we have our header and a button that says click me, but doesn't do anything. Okay. Failed to load the resource. And sometimes you'll see this with libraries that you're using. I wouldn't worry about it too much as long as everything is working and presenting correctly. So let's go ahead and come back here. Now we need to go ahead and, so we've got our website, and this is the first part of our user story. When I go to the website, I see a button. Which we can pull back up. Yes, when I go to the website, I see a button. When I click the button, I want to see a list of users from that JSON placeholder. So right now, we don't have anything working with that button. Okay, we need to add an event listener, like we learned about last week. So once we're going to go ahead and add down here, we're going to add our add button listener. Okay. All the fancy setup here. So now we want to select our button so that we can add the listener to that. Oh, this is doing it a little differently. We set it up differently last time where we did it just the oh, what was it? Just an add listener or add event listener to it. But here we are doing a separate function. So just know there's many different ways you can add these event listeners and different ways to set it up. So with this one, we're going to have a listener function, and within it, we're going to select our button and then do something when we, we'll continue on here. So our button is going to be query selector button. Okay, so we're grabbing our button. Now we're going to add the listener, which is going to be an on click. So this is a little different. Last week I showed you how to do the add event listener, and we just put click as the event to listen for, but here we're doing this on click. Looks like we can hover over it here and see it's an event handler. So we can see on click fires when they click the left mouse button on the object. We're going to have the event, which is that click. And when that click happens, we want to, I guess we're grabbing that inner text and we want it to set it to say clicked. Okay, so what do we think this is doing for that button? What does
It's
this mean?
just changing what the text of the button itself, the text within it to say clicked.
That's what I'm assuming. So I'm assuming that too. So I think that's what's going to happen. We're going to see, of course, we can't do anything without calling this. We're going to set our on load. Uh, and we're going to set that add event listener function to run on load. Okay. So let's save that. Let's come back to our website. I'm going to refresh just in case, even though live server should be refreshing automatically. So now when I click this button, I'm assuming that it's going to grab this text and change it to say clicked. And it does. All right, no errors here in our console. Everything looks good for our event listener. So we have it working where when we click the button, it'll do something. Awesome. So now we don't just want it to change the inner text. We actually want it to go to that website, basically, grab all that JSON and bring it back and put it on our web page. So here we are going to add another function called, oops, get users. Okay, with this one, I'm going to do something called async. Does anybody know what that means specifically with this function? Have we seen this before? Something new?
Yeah, I mean we've seen async await. Me personally, just having a hard time getting words to explain it. Someone wants to chime in.
Okay. Does anybody else have a good idea of what this async is doing?
Creates an asynchronous function.
Yes, but if you don't know what asynchronous means, what is this doing?
Does it have something to do with waiting till the screen is all loaded before it starts taking action, or is that something different?
So yeah, that's along the right path. Async is allowing, so with JavaScript, it will run through these functions in order with how they're called. And it has to wait. If I were to do this get users, or let's see, if I add a button listener, it has to complete this, oh gosh, before if I were to call get users here, it would have to complete this before it moves on to this. But if we're trying to grab these users and maybe use it within this button click, we want it to be able to get the users at the same time as it's working on this function here for this button click. So by adding async, you're basically saying don't don't stop with everything else and wait. Like, how can I explain this? Don't stop the process. Just go ahead and kind of pause, let this finish and get you the information, and then keep going. Um, just so nothing is held up too long waiting for this to complete. So if we had another function down here that didn't rely on this get users, um, this would be working in the background while that other function was running as well. Does that kind of make sense? And if anybody thinks I didn't explain that well enough or has a better way to explain that, let me know.
Can you explain one more time what would happen if you didn't have that async up there?
So right now, the way I have this set up, nothing actually would happen. As I get further along, I'll show you kind of what would happen if we took the async out. But right now, with this if I took this out, um, this would have to complete fully. Well, this would have to complete fully first, this add button listener, and then this get users if I put it underneath here, but that's not how I'm using this. Here, let me keep going. I'll finish how we're using this, and then I'll show you how we use the async with that. But async is important to this because I want this function to run without stopping the program, basically. So for this, we get users. I don't know if y'all have been introduced to the fetch. Um,
We have,
okay, good.
so it's been synonymous with the async await each time we've seen it.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to set this response I'm going to await a fetch from this API that we're using, that JSON placeholder, because I want to grab all those users. So with this, we're telling it to go ahead and get that information first. And then after that, we are going to have the body of this get users. We're going to await our response and format the JSON. So this will take the JSON from this and just format it correctly for our body. And then we're going to return body here. Okay, so when this is done, I should get back a JSON list of users that I can work with and manipulate in my HTML. Well, in the JavaScript. Okay, so we're going to wait that fetch, make sure we get the information back. We have to do an await here as well because we need to wait for the response to finish before we can go ahead and call this JSON method on it. Are we following that?
But basically, if we didn't have the async await in there, when this whole website loads up, it's the rest of the functions aren't going to be able to load because it's going to be waiting to reach out to that URL, that URL, correct?
Yes,
So
if we put it up here, this get users, if that was the first function we called, everything else would wait until this finished.
right, but if we didn't
But
have the async await, we would get an error because everything would need to load accordingly, but we need to wait for that URL to get that response back, right? There's some time that needs to happen.
yeah, you mean like so if we put it here,
Well,
if we didn't,
I'm saying if we didn't use an async await, because that's what that's doing, right? It's from what I'm seeing in the chat, what Jonathan posted and what Justin, I'm just trying to make sense of it and then kind of go over it. You use that so that way the page should load without.
so it will load, but only because we're not doing anything with this information yet. This get users, because we're not actually using anything from this function, it doesn't break anything with the website. The website will still load the HTML and everything, and we can, well, the click me doesn't work. Okay. So that, I
Because we're
guess
getting an error,
it,
correct?
it does break. It's not working. This event listener, this button listener is not working.
Yeah, because it's not getting to that point. Like the HTML loads, and once we get to the script to load up the script within the website, we never get to add event listener because we get an error. But with the async await, that's like, okay, you're going to run off on your own, and we're going to keep loading up the rest of the script.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
So I was doing some testing with this too. You get a lot of side effects too. So even if it runs, you'll get a lot of weird behaviors that aren't predictable. I did this on a project 2 projects ago where I just wrote without it. I just used a regular fetch command.
Hmm.
And I was still getting the functions to run, but I was getting super weird results, like side effects everywhere, all kinds of nonsense. Because there was no promise. It wasn't waiting on a promise. So
Yeah, so admittedly, promises are still kind of an obscure thing for me to kind of fully grasp, but the good news is you don't have to fully understand what's going on, these inner workings, as long as you just keep using this async await. Like structure it every time like this, and then you shouldn't have any issues with the data being returned from this fetch. Okay, so we've got the get users happening here. But now we want, when we click the button, we want these users to be put onto our web page. So first thing is, instead of doing this clicked, we're going to replace this with our get users. They still leave it on there. I'm not going to leave it on there. Well, yeah, well, so we could see what we're doing. Okay, so now I want to actually get the users because that's what we want to happen when we click this button. So we will call this users JSON. And again, we're going to await get users. Why is that? Within async. Okay, so what this is telling me is I'm trying to have this await feature here. You know, let me get this data before we keep running through, or while we're running through this function. But it's not letting me do it within this because I need to throw an async in here as well. So now this is another function that will run, and it will run the same time that this is running here, basically. And we're doing this await so that we can get this data back from this function before continuing on with the rest, which right now the rest is just going to be a console log, our JSON. If we didn't have these asyncs, then it may work, but not with the, let's see. We wouldn't be able to use this await. So we might not get all the data back that we want, or let's try it. Let's see what happens when we come down. Okay. So if refreshing, we're not getting any errors. We're good. We're going to click this and see what happens. It says that's not a function at get users, button on click. Am I doing first? Let me look at this, make sure this is set up correctly. Do we see anything wrong with? I don't see anything wrong with the way the function's set up. I was hoping I would see more issues with the await and the async. Okay, we're just gonna go back to normal then. We have all of our awaits. I feel it's something with the await and the async that's not letting this work. And we have our add button listener. Okay. So hopefully this works. If not, we'll see. It worked. Okay. So something with that await and I'm thinking maybe the fetch ran but didn't get anything. Because it doesn't get anything, it can't really do. We didn't wait for the fetch to happen, and we're trying to do that response JSON before this is done, so it's not working. So that's why we have all these awaits and asyncs, so that we can have this happen first and then this happen next. And this is all happening within this function at the same time this function is running as well. And that's why we have these async. So these both can run at the same time. Are we following? Yes. Okay. So we have, oh, and further down in the README, it says we want we want to do something with the return value of this function inside of another function. So that is most of the time you will do the async when you're doing these API calls, because you're going to want to get the data and then do something with that inside another function. Okay, so now we've got the data when they click. We're just logging it right now. We're going to have to transform it into our HTML. So we know how to do that. Let's see. It looks like we're going to go ahead and do this in JavaScript. We're going to create a user element. Okay, create user element. We're going to take in the user. And we're going to make a container for that. Which is document, create element. We're going to make a div. So that's going to be a container for it. We're going to create the name for this user. Name will be another create element. It'll be a header. And then we're also going to create their email, which will be, we're going to have that be a paragraph element. So right now, what do I have right here? What have I just created within this create user element? Do I have really anything of use?
No, you just have a bunch of tags.
Yeah, I have a bunch of empty tags. Okay, so we created the empty tags. Now we are going to set those text contents. So we are going to set the name text content. So we are imagining we're going to pass in a user into this user element, and we're going to manipulate the data to add the user's name and the email is going to be the user email. And I guess we're doing a class name for the div to go ahead and probably grab it easier later. This is going to be called list group item. Okay. Where did I get this? Where do we think this comes from?
That comes from looking at our JSON file.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's going to come from the JSON. Oh, I don't have it up here anymore. We can look at it here. So the JSON that we're being returned, it looks like every user here is going to have an ID that's unique to them, a name, a username, an email, and an address. So we are imagining we're going to pass in our user and grab the name by just referencing the name, user.name, to grab it from the JSON. Same with the email. We can do user.email, and these are all, key value pairs in JSON. So it's going to be grabbing the name key and the email key and return to us the values within those. Okay, so we've went ahead and set those items to that. So we've edited these items to be what we want to be. And what was the last step after we manipulate the items? I'll go ahead and answer. It's to append them to our HTML. Okay, so we're going to append our name, and we are going to append the email. All right, so this function right here is going to take in a user and then create a name and email element. And we are putting it in this div that we've created as well. All right, so next we are going to be draw users. Following the README here. We'll create this function and then we're going to figure out, look at what we think this is doing. So here we're going to pass in the users. Okay, we're going to, it looks like, select the element with an ID of main. So if we look back in our HTML, it looks like this div right here that we created, we gave an ID of main. Okay, so we're going to select that div. And we are going to for let user of users. Let's create user element user. And then we're going to append. Okay, so what are we doing with this one now? We've created this user element. And now it looks like we're calling it here. So what is this draw users function doing? What are we having this do? Somebody besides Sean. Let's see.
It puts the user's information into the HTML document in a div.
Yeah, how is it doing that?
Through the main ID.
Yeah, so we're grabbing the main ID, yes, and it looks like we're going to pass in a users list and we're going to iterate through that list, or however we're going to pass in a bunch of users and iterate through them. And it looks like we are calling this function to create a user. So we're going to be doing this for each user within our list of users. And it's going to plug it in that main div. Okay, so you could write it all in one function, but this is just a little cleaner here. And that way we can reuse this as well if we want to use it elsewhere within our application. So that is why we have broke it down and did this create user element. Okay, we have our get users async. Okay, so now for the event listener, instead of just logging it, we want to perform this draw users function instead. And we are going to pass in this users JSON that we are getting from this other get users function. Users JSON. Okay, so now when we click on the button, it should go ahead and call this get users, go over here, fetch our list of users JSON. Once we get that back, we're going to plug that into this draw users. So we're going to pass the JSON in here, which will iterate through each of those and should create this element for each users in that list. Okay, so now let's look and see what we've done. All right, so we're going to go here, click me, failed to execute append child. Parameter 1 is not of type node at draw users button on click. Let's see. Draw users. And we had, let's see, what was the error we got? Failed to execute append child on node parameter 1. Okay, so it's having an issue with this append child. Okay, do we see anything wrong with my code?
Does div have to be in quotation marks?
Ooh, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Let me turn the volume up. What was that?
Does the div have to be in quotation marks?
This append child div?
Oh no, because it's a variable. Never mind.
Okay. Yeah, good thought. So it looks like okay, the main dot append child. We have main defined here, and it said it was an issue with the node. Parameter 1 is not of type node. Okay. Let me.
Are you able to add that some print statements so we can see? Because I saw something that was talking about the promise object,
Yes.
but
And add a console log here. See if we even get the user's JSON back. Okay, so we get the user's JSON back, but then it's having an issue. I wonder if there's another async thing here I have to add. Okay, I bet there is.
Just looking at the README and what you have in your create user element under your append childs, the README has return div.
Oh, this,
Yeah, up under the pen child. Yeah, where your mouse is at, right up under that after the curly bracket, right? Oh, wait, before it says return div, like that.
okay, cause do we know why? Why do we need that?
So we can pass it to
Because
the next function.
Yes, exactly. We needed this to actually return something. It was trying to do things, but there was no return in that to use within this. We're calling it here, this create users, because we were trying to append this. So we needed this to finish completely first and give us a return to go ahead and append onto that main. Okay, good catch. So that hopefully fixed it. We will see. Yes, there we go. So we have all of our users printing onto this page here from that JSON file that we were given, or JSON data. So we are halfway there. When we click it, it gives us the users, but that's all this does. We want it to, when we click it again, we want it to go ahead and delete the users now. So initially, I'm thinking maybe we can just, grab the element, like we did the last time. We just go ahead and grab and clear it. But it's going to be the same button click. So I'm only going to have this one listener waiting for this click. So if I throw in something to like grab that div container and try to clear it out, it's going to do that every time we click the button. So we can't just throw it within this listener. This is where we're going to have a state to go ahead and point to with this listener. We want to set just kind of a general state for our web page that we can reference, and it'll make a little bit more sense here in a second. We're just going to add the state at the top here. And it's going to be, we're going to call this is users loaded. And it's going to set to false initially when you log on to this page. So when you load this page up, this state is always going to be set to false initially by default. Is users loaded is false. Awesome. So I can do something with this now. We know if we want to reset users. So with this, I can go ahead, we'll probably do something with our button click where when we click it, we want this state to change to true. Because when we click it, we'll have is users loaded true. But then it's going to do that every time I click the button. So we're going to have to figure out a way to kind of work with this state. For anybody who hasn't been looking ahead in the README, do you have any ideas how I might be able to work with this state? Maybe rewrite our listener a little bit or some new functions. No,
Toggle users.
like a toggle. Yeah, that's a good idea. So you mean like within the event listener, doing like or creating a new function, toggle.
I'm writing it like I would create a function like toggle users and set that as an async.
Mhm.
And then through that do a series of if statements based on if users is loaded, state dot if, and then add your button dot context for like loaded users or whatever you want to do.
Okay. Yeah, I like the way that's going. I think we could get it a bit simpler, but I could see where that I could see following that way too. We're
You could
gonna
have real fun and do a map with draw users in that function as well, right?
yeah. We could. I'm gonna keep it super simple. That's definitely something you could play around with though and flesh out too. There's no wrong way to do this for sure, but we're gonna break this down a little bit. So we're going to have it looks like the README wants us to do like a reset function. I probably would have done what you did the way you were thinking, Justin, but we're gonna see how this reset is working because you can reference this later then too in the README. Okay, so with a reset, we're imagining interesting. So we're just gonna see what they're doing and kind of talk through what it's doing here. Okay. What can anybody tell me what we think this line here is looking at? What it's doing?
Uh,
No,
It's flipping the state.
it's flipping the state. Yes. Yes. So right here, we're grabbing this state is user loaded or users loaded, and we're setting it equal to the other, the opposite of that, the not state. That exclamation mark is the not version of this. So since it's a Boolean, it'll be true is the opposite or false if it's set to false. So it's flipping it. We're going to grab our button here. Document, query selector button. Okay, and now when I click that button, this is the toggle that Justin was talking about. This is making that a toggle. We're going to take that text content and we're going to make it So we're going to grab this Boolean. Are they loaded? True or false? We're going to look at that. Is users loaded? We're going to say, okay, are they loaded? Yes or no? Okay. If they are, if it's false, or if it's set to if it's equal to that false initially, we're going to have the button say get users. Otherwise, we want the button to say remove users. Okay, so what this is doing is setting that text content. It's going to look at this if it's true or false. I'm not sure if this is going to work how we think it's going to work, but we're following the README and we'll see. Okay, let's just play with this and see what this does. Okay, so right now we have click me. When we click this, it should. Wait, is it not changing it?
Did you refresh your server?
Oh, I didn't, but you know what? We're not doing anything with reset. We haven't called this function anywhere. So we are going to plug it in somewhere. Where is it having us plug it in?
Wouldn't it be in the event listener? Because the event
Yes.
listener is going to have a for loop or an if statement being like, if it's this, do this. If not, do this.
Yes. Okay, so it looks like for our event listener now, like you said, we want it to do something based on the state. So we are going to, let's get rid of this. On click, we're going to look at that state. And I can't, if anybody else can wrap their head around why we're doing the opposite for
It's because on line 7, line 9, or
it's
line
because,
7 would say when you make the is user loaded to be true. So
Mhm.
that means that when it's true, then we get users. If not, then remove users.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to see it in action here to really wrap my head around. But so we are gonna look if it's the opposite. So if it's true, somebody correct me if I'm speaking incorrectly about that. It's not, is it true? I'm gonna have to step through this with the debugger too to see. Personally, we're going to await the get users. This is where we're going to call that get users. So if the state is whatever this is going to be, I'm reading this if the state is true because when this page loads, it's automatically set to false. So when we click the button, if the state is true, then we're going to get users and then we're going to do the draw users. I don't think that's how it's supposed to be.
Well, if it's false, it's not going to load the users. So if it's true, the users will load. And then it'll start a whole chain of events from there.
We're going to
Are
trust.
we trying to draw user or remove users now?
So the first one's, according to the README, we're going to do the draw users. So that's why I'm a little confused on this state. We're going to add some console logs here to look at this.
Yeah, because you would think if the state is true, then put the users on the screen. But like how it says, like you said, the README, it says if it's not true. So if it's false, put the users on the screen. That's how I'm reading it.
Well, so when this page is loaded, we've defined it to default to false. So how I'm reading this is if it's the opposite of or I know I guess it would just be if it's false, right? That's what that means. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Justin's shaking his head.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I think I'm tracking too. It's if
Yeah,
it's off
yeah.
as false, that's where you want it to be when you click it.
Right.
You want it to be false when you click it. So it goes, okay, it's false. Let me do all this. And then it hits the reset button at the bottom, which will make it true, I imagine.
Yes, exactly. So this, it's been a minute since JavaScript, but this exclamation mark in front of this is saying like false. If this Boolean is false.
Right. And we want it to be checking for false because when we click it, it's going to
Yes.
say, is it false? Yes, it is.
Yes, exactly. So when we load our HTML, we're figuring this out together. When we load this, this is going to default to false. So when we click the button, if it's false, which it should be, we want it to get the users and put them on the screen. And then at that point, well, so if it's, oh gosh, there's a dog here. Sorry if you hear that. So we've got, if it's false, we want the users on the screen. Let's go ahead and throw an else in. We know now if it's true, so we want it to remove the users. So let's put a placeholder in here. We're going to write this soon. We want to remove users. We're going to do a function to remove users. Okay, so if it's false, we're going to get them. If it's not, we're going to remove them. And outside of this whole thing, we're going to go ahead and reset. So this is where it will flip it back. I think, is that what we're doing? So outside of that, so if it's true, we're going to get them, and then we're going to reset, which will look at that state and flip it to the other, it'll put it to true. So now our state should be true, and if we click the button again, it'll go to the else statement to remove the users. Are we tracking now? Yes. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in our remove users. We're gonna put that in. We'll just put it down here after the get. We'll do a remove users. Oop.
And so this function should just set it back to false, essentially.
Well, this function, we're setting it back to false in this event listener, because it's going to perform this if else statements. And then after it performs those, it's going to do that reset, which flips it to the other true or false. It's going to, so if we remove users, so that would be after we have the users drawn on there, which when that runs, it'll come to the reset, which will look at that state, which is false, and flip it to true. Or no, if that's, oh,
That's right. Let's see.
yes. Okay. And then, so then the next time it runs, it'll be, the state will be true and hit this, which will remove user, which we're writing now, and then go ahead down to the reset and do the same thing again where it comes up here. So we don't have to write changing the state within either of these two functions. You probably could, but that wouldn't be dry. So you could probably not have this reset at all and just throw it in these draw users or remove users if it's easier for you to think that way. This reset kind of takes it out and makes it where we're only using one function to change the state back and forth. Okay, so let's do this remove user. We're going to do our selection here. We're going to grab that main, which is that document. Let's see, select query selector. The ID main, which is that div that we put in and just called main. Now here with the users, we're going to, let's see, well, first child. I have not seen this. So if there's a child node within this main div, which we've that's how we're creating our user elements is we've created a new div within the div. So this is the child element. So while there's a child element, basically a user within our main div, we want to remove the child element. And it will just keep going through that while there is a first child. So it should go down the list and remove that first element until there's nothing left. Okay. So I think that's all we need now. We have our get users, remove users. We have our state here that we're resetting back and forth based on after we go through this if-else statement, and then after it works through those, it's going to do the reset, flip the state back and forth. So this should be good. This is all being done within our button listener. So let's give it a shot. See what happens. Okay, so fresh page. Now when I click this, it should draw up all the users on there and say get users. I think that's weird. We set it to get users, but okay. So we've got them all. Good. Now when we click it again, so let's go ahead and we're gonna add some console logs so y'all can see this. We're gonna look at the state both times. Just so you can see this flip back and forth with this button click. Okay, so when we click me, we can see our state is false. I need to add another right after the reset because that's where we're flipping it. Console log. Oh, how do I do an F string in JavaScript? Is this right? Am I on the right track? No.
No, it's just backticks.
Oh, it's backticks.
Yeah, backticks and then the $sign for around what you want to
Tick,
interpolate.
$sign.
Around what you, and then the
Curly brackets.
brackets, yeah, around what you want to interpolate.
Okay. Let's do that. So we're going to add in there. And the backtick again. Okay. Is it, I can just type the text though, otherwise around it. Let's
Yeah, outside the brackets.
Okay. Let's copy this. Put it there too. And then we're going to have our state after reset. Just so we can watch this flipping back and forth. Okay, coming back here. So when we click it, the initial state was false when we loaded this. Now after the reset, it flips it to true. So now when we click again, it should be under the assumption that our is users loaded state is true. And then it should remove the users. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so it was true. And then after the reset, now it's false.
Wait a minute, can you reset that? I wasn't sure the ternary was working there.
Yeah, it seems like you need to flip the
That's what I was
remove
saying.
users.
That's what I was thinking. When I was reading that initially, I thought that looked weird. I'm like, why would we push get? Because let's look at that. So right now we're looking at that's
Yeah, that's backwards for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. If it's true, it should be remove users, and if it's false, it should be get. Let's see if this looks better now. Okay, there we go. Click me. Awesome. Yep, because our state is true for the remove users. get users, remove. So we can just watch that state flip back and forth each time.
When I first saw that, I thought the state was backwards. I'm like, oh no. So, all right.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna let that play out, but I'm like, this doesn't look right. This is where it all threw me off here with this reset and this context button. Got me all confused, but all right, it's working as it should. It's flipping our state each time with this handy reset. Um, if you want like a toggle state, you can go ahead and like bookmark this if you want and just refer back to this to do that. And, we went ahead and just used it outside of our if else statements to kind of flip that state back and forth. This was a lot of extra lecture though when we were supposed to be covering APIs, which was essentially what this was. Hitting this endpoint here with JSON to stick within our HTML. And I don't know if I guess our styles are working. Yeah, that looks different than the bootstrap is not that pretty for these, but it can be nice in other instances. Does anybody have any questions on the lecture today? What we went through. There are a bunch of different ways to do this, and we didn't have to kind of separate it all out as we did. We could have built this reset in within our get and remove users functions. Tons of different ways to do this, just however your mind works. But is there any confusion on especially this await? Just follow this structure every time when you're trying to grab your JSON from an endpoint, and it should work for you. All right, no questions. Okay, so let's look at what our assignment is for the day. Oh, I'm going to stop recording.